The first time the new alpha walked into my cafe, I prayed he wouldn't smell me. Not to any higher power or moon goddess or whatever old alphas like to swear by. Just a quick, desperate little plea to the universe as I wiped milk off the counter and pretended my hands weren't shaking. It was a Tuesday morning rush. The kind of busy where the line curves toward the door, and everyone thinks their caffeine needs are more urgent than everyone else's emotional stability. Warm light from the string bulbs flickered over wooden tables, laptops, suits, yoga pants, and one guy who'd been just 5 more minutes with his novel draft for the last 6 months. Safe chaos. My favorite kind. 2 oat lattes, 1 caramel macchiato, extra shot, and a hot chocolate for the tiny dictator in the dinosaur hoodie, I called, sliding cups onto the pickup counter. "Hey," Sam said from the register, leaning in. "Your tiny dictator is glaring. I think you underfrothed his milk." I glanced up. The kid stared at his hot chocolate with the intense disappointment of a king betrayed. "I didn't put enough marshmallows," I corrected. "There's a difference." I added 2 more marshmallows and slid the cup closer. The kid's face lit up. One crisis averted. This was my universe. The hiss of the espresso machine, the clack of ceramic on wood, the low murmur of voices. The smell of fresh pastries and beans, carefully layered over the faint trace of too many strangers' sweat and perfume. And under it all, my own scent, pressed flat and neutral. Years of practice, years of pretending. "Noah, can you take the next ones?" "My brain's melting," Sam groaned. "Your brain melted the day you tried to microwave metal," I told him, stepping up to the register. "That was one time. It was enough time to set off the fire alarm." He rolled his eyes and faced the next customer. "Good morning, what can I get you?" The door opened. It wasn't the bell that got me. It wasn't even the temperature shift, though a thread of cold air did snake across the floor and curl around my ankles. It was the way the room changed. Conversations stuttered. The older woman in the corner who never looked up from her crossword glanced at the door. Someone further back in line straightened without realizing. Betas didn't have the words for it, but their bodies knew. Predator. I didn't smell him first. I never did. That part of me had always been quiet, broken. Whatever label the old pack had written on my file before they shelved me. But I felt him. Like pressure against the air, a subtle shift in gravity. Like some part of the world had turned its head. He was tall, of course. That was in the manual somewhere. Broad shoulders filling out a dark coat, one hand still on the door, gaze sweeping the cafe in an unhurried assessing line. His hair was dark and a little too neat, like he hadn't yet learned this city would eat your polish and spit you out. New. That was my first thought. Dangerous was the second. He didn't look at me immediately. His eyes moved across the space, tracing exits and bodies, lingering on raised voices and twitchy hands. Classic alpha behavior. Calculate the room. Control it if necessary. My heart thudded fast and stupid under my apron. I dropped my gaze to the touchscreen and pretended to be extremely invested in whether the next order wanted almond milk or oat. I'd spent years perfecting the art of being background. Nice. Forgettable. Non-threatening. It worked on almost everyone. "Sir, what can I get you?" Sam asked. His voice sounded thin. "I'll have..." The newcomer's voice was low and smooth, with that clipped precision that comes from too many meetings and not enough sleep. "A black coffee. Drip. No sugar." "Of course. Name?" Sam asked. For a heartbeat the alpha didn't answer. Then, quietly, "Lenn, Lenn." The syllable skittered down my spine and my fingers tightened on the counter. The new head of the city pack had a name now. And it was standing 3 people away from me, paying in cash like he didn't trust cards. Sam handed him the receipt and pointed toward me. "Pick up just over there." Of course he did. I turned toward the machine, focused on the motions, filter, grounds, water. Easy. My body knew the dance by muscle memory. But my skin prickled, every nerve screaming that he was getting closer. That invisible pressure intensified, not crushing, just there. "Don't look up," I told myself. He's just another customer. Just another alpha in a city where you're officially a beta. You're fine. Which would have been a great strategy if Betas' hands didn't start shaking when certain people got too close. I exhaled slowly, setting the cup under the spout. The cafe buzzed around me, but the sound felt muted, like someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. One footstep. Another. The scent hit me then, not the overwhelming, suffocating punch I remembered from my old pack, but something quieter. Clean. Cool. Like rain that hadn't decided yet if it wanted to be a storm. I didn't sway. I didn't fall. I didn't do any of the things an Omega was supposed to do. My fingers just tightened around the ceramic, knuckles whitening. "Drip coffee for Lenn," I called out, and my voice sounded almost normal. He approached the counter, and this time when I looked up, his gaze was already on me. Up close, the details sharpened, dark eyes that missed nothing. A faint line between his brows like he'd been frowning. At the world for so long it had left a mark, the kind of stillness that wasn't softness but leashed motion. "Predator," my hindbrain whispered. "New alpha," my memory supplied. "Man," my chest corrected, unwanted and quiet. Just a man. He reached for the cup, then paused. The space between us shrank by a fraction as he leaned in, just enough that most people wouldn't notice. I did. "You from around here?" he asked. The question was casual on the surface. Underneath, it was anything but. "Where do you belong? Who claims you?" My mouth was dry. I met his gaze anyway, because if you look away too fast, they smell fear, and I'd spent too many years teaching my body to lie. "Hear enough," I said, letting the words land with a soft thud between us. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not surprise. Not quite. More like interest. The kind you get when the puzzle piece you picked up isn't the shape you expected. His nostrils flared. Just barely. Oh, ice slid down my spine. He smelled something. Not the crash of Omega scent that used to make alphas restless and cruel and possessive. Not the sharp spike of panic I kept tucked under layers of coffee and detergent. Something else. Something that made his posture change, fractionally, as if he'd just confirmed a suspicion. "Coffee's hot," I added, because my brain had clearly decided that sarcasm was an acceptable substitute for survival instincts. His lips curved. Not a full smile, just a faint shift, like he wasn't used to letting it happen. "I'll keep that in mind," he said. He didn't move away immediately. It was subtle, but I felt it. The weight of his attention, the measured way he took me in. Dark hair. Soft eyes. Two thin wrists. No mark on my neck. Nothing to see here. My pulse hammered anyway. "Enjoy your drink," I said, sliding the cup a bit closer, hoping he'd take the hint and his terrifying gravity with him. He took the cup, fingers brushing the cardboard sleeve, and finally straightened. For a second, I could breathe again. Then he said it. "I'll see you again, Noah." My name. No one had said it like that in years. Like it was a fact, not a courtesy. Like he'd pulled it from a file somewhere instead of the name tag on my apron. Except my apron just said N. I watched him walk out into the pale city light, the bell over the door chiming, cheerfully like the universe wasn't in the middle of laughing at me. Sam nudged me with his elbow. "Dude. You okay? You look like you saw a ghost." "Worse," I said, unable to tear my eyes away from the glass door even after it swung shut. My heartbeat was still too loud in my ears. I think the pack just found my cafe. And somehow, me. By the time I made it home, the sky had gone from pale gray to that deep indigo that swallows outlines and makes the streetlights look like floating beads of fire. My hands shook the entire walk. I kept telling myself it was the cold. Or the caffeine. Or anything except what it actually was. A new alpha in the city wasn't my problem. A new alpha, who somehow knew my name absolutely was. My apartment sat on the 4th floor of an aging brick building that smelled like laundry detergent and someone's nightly instant ramen. It wasn't big, but it was mine. Clean lines, neutral colors, minimal surfaces. Nothing personal enough to hold scent. I'd read once that wolves marked homes with their presence. Mine was designed to erase me entirely. I locked the door, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the sink to splash water on my face. My reflection in the mirror was just a faint outline, dark hair sticking up, soft tired eyes, and a worry line between my brows I didn't remember earning. He didn't smell anything, I told the mirror. That was the whole point of my life. He wasn't supposed to. And yet when Lenn had looked at me across the cafe, something inside me had jolted like a wire shorting. Not the usual panic. Not the Omega drop. Something sharper. "No," I whispered, gripping the porcelain sink. He smelled curiosity. That's all. Alphas look at everything like they're 2 seconds from sorting it into categories. It was stupid, really. I'd built my entire existence around being invisible. And then he came in, and, in under 3 minutes, looked straight through all of it. I dried my face with a towel, forcing my heartbeat back into something resembling normal. I turned on a lamp. The warm light softened the edges of the room, the neat bed, the tiny kitchen, the stack of books by the window. Safe. Unremarkable. Perfect. Then, knock. Not loud, not frantic. A slow, deliberate sound that carried more weight than any shout. My stomach dropped. No one knocked on my door. Not at this hour. Not ever. Another knock, same rhythm. Calm. Patient. Territorial. I didn't move. Maybe if I stayed quiet. Noah. The voice on the other side was unmistakable. Smooth. Low. Completely at odds with the hammering in my chest. We need to talk. I closed my eyes. No, we don't, I whispered to myself. We absolutely do not. But the thing about alphas, good ones, bad ones, doesn't matter, is that they don't make requests. They make declarations. My feet moved before my brain approved. I unlocked the door, but left the chain in place. Lenn stood in the dim hallway, hands in the pockets of his coat, not a hair out of place. Like he'd walked out of a polished photograph and into my extremely unphotogenic night. Open the door, he said, not harshly, but with the kind of authority that had betas probably nodding before they even heard the words. No. I tightened my grip on the door. It's late. Yes, he agreed. That's why you should let me in. That's not how that works. He exhaled once, slowly, like he was recalibrating. Then he leaned slightly closer, not enough to be threatening, but enough that I felt the shift of air between us. I found something, he said quietly. About you. My throat tightened. Congrats, I snapped. Most people just stalk social media. You go straight for the files? His expression didn't change. These weren't social media. Something cold curled at the base of my spine. I closed the door just enough to rest my forehead against the edge. What do you want, Lenn? To talk. And if I say no? You won't. Every part of me bristled at the certainty in his voice, but the worst part was that he wasn't wrong. I unhooked the chain and opened the door fully. 5 minutes. He stepped inside. The tiny apartment suddenly felt too small, like his presence filled every corner. He didn't touch anything. Didn't move more than a step past the threshold. But he looked, really looked, at the space that had taken me years to scrub clean of scent and memory. This place is very controlled, he said. That's one word for it. Empty. That's another. He turned toward me. You lived like this for how long? Long enough. A muscle in his jaw twitched, like he was holding back a dozen questions. But instead of asking any of them, he pulled a folded sheet of paper from his coat. He didn't hand it to me. He just held it, letting the weight of it exist between us. I went through the old pack records, he said. The ones the previous alpha tried to bury. My heart dropped so fast it hurt. Don't, I whispered. Don't do this. There was a list, he continued, voice quieter now. Omegas who were never claimed. Or dismissed. You were on it. I swallowed. So. That was years ago. They labeled you, he said, eyes locking onto mine. Non-responsive to scent. Unfit. The words hit harder than I expected, like being punched by a memory I thought I'd outgrown. I wasn't good enough, I said, forcing my voice steady. End of story. No. Lenn's tone sharpened, not angry, but fierce. It means they were too weak to understand different. I laughed once, a sharp, humorless sound. Is that your sales pitch? It's the truth, he said. Silence hung between us, thick and electric. What do you want from me? I asked finally. He hesitated just long enough for the tension to twist. Then, I'm here to bring you back, he said. Properly. A cold wave rolled through me. No. Yes. No. I repeated, stepping forward and pushing against his chest. Not enough to move him, just enough to make a point. I'm not going anywhere with you. His gaze flickered down to where my palm pressed against him. For a terrifying second, I thought he might grab my wrist. He didn't. He just said, I'll fix what they broke. You don't get to fix me, I snapped. We stared at each other, breaths uneven. Then I stepped back, grabbed the door, and slammed it shut in his face. The latch clicked. Silence. My knees finally buckled, and I caught myself on the wall, heart racing in a way it hadn't in years. Because for the first time since I ran from the pack, someone had come looking. And this time, he wasn't leaving without an answer. For the next 3 days, Lenn became a problem I couldn't outrun. Mostly because he didn't give me the chance. He didn't break into my apartment. He didn't force his way into my space. He didn't growl or command or do any of the things alphas were supposed to do when they wanted something. Instead, he appeared everywhere. The first coincidence happened the morning after he'd shown up at my door, when I'd convinced myself he'd go back to his pack and forget all about the inconvenient, scentless Omega who didn't want to be found. I stepped out of my building, tugging my jacket tighter around me against the early chill. And there he was, leaning against a lamppost, suit immaculate, tie perfect, hands in pockets, like a very polite nightmare. He glanced up. "Morning." I froze mid-step. "No." His brow lifted slightly. "No? No. Whatever this is, no." A ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I'm walking to the office. You're headed in the same direction." The worst part? He wasn't wrong. The cafe was 5 blocks from my building. The pack's new administrative office was 6 blocks beyond that. So technically, he wasn't lying. Didn't stop me from glaring at him for the entire walk. By midday, I'd convinced myself that was the end of it. And then he came into the cafe during my shift. Again. Sam elbowed me as I cleaned the espresso machine. "Your shadow is here." "He is not my shadow. He's looking at you like you owe him money." "That I'd understand," I muttered. Lenn approached the counter, his presence so heavy it made the air feel charged. The betas in line straightened subconsciously, like his aura rearranged their posture for them. He didn't even look at them. His attention tracked directly to me. "Drip coffee," he said. "No sugar." I rolled my eyes. "Live a little." "Noted," he replied, expression unchanging. "For next time?" "Next time." "Great." I turned to make the coffee, feeling his gaze linger on me longer than any caffeine order deserved. When I set the cup down, he didn't take it immediately. Instead, he leaned in slightly, just enough for my heart to kick like it was trying to escape. "You left before we finished talking," he said. "That was intentional." "Still," he answered. "We're not done." "Oh, I assure you, we are." I smiled tightly. "You know stalking is illegal, right?" He didn't even blink. "I call it supervising." Behind me, Sam choked on a laugh. I wanted to throw the coffee in Lenn's face. I also wanted to sprint out of the building. Instead, I handed him the cup and walked away before I did either. The second coincidence happened that evening. I left the cafe, tugging my hood up as a thin drizzle started to fall. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, turning everything gold and blurred. I made it 2 blocks before someone stepped beside me, matching my pace. "Lenn." "Of course." I shot him a look. "You have got to be kidding." "You forgot an umbrella," he said simply. I blinked at him. "That's your explanation? That's why you're here?" He held out a folded black umbrella. "You'll get sick." "I don't get sick." His eyes dipped briefly to my too thin coat. "You will." I should have snapped at him. Should have pushed the umbrella back into his hands and told him to mind his own business. Instead, I took it. His fingers brushed mine for a fraction of a second. Barely contact, barely anything, and yet heat rushed up my arm like a spark. I swallowed hard and looked away. "Thanks." A pause. "You're welcome," he said quietly. The third accidental meeting happened the next morning when I tried a different route to work. One that added 7 unnecessary minutes. One that curved through the small park by the river, the exact opposite direction from the pack office. I made it halfway across the footpath before I spotted him, sitting on a bench, with a takeaway cup. I stopped dead. "How?" He glanced up from his phone. "You're early?" That wasn't an answer. He tilted his head slightly. "You take this route when you want to avoid your usual one." My stomach twisted. "Why do you know that?" "Because the pack kept records," he said calmly. "Old ones, on every Omega who left or was dismissed. Including you." I felt something dark and sharp settle in my chest. "So you memorized my walking habits?" He nodded once, like this was perfectly reasonable. "And your work schedule. And the bus line you avoid because it passes the old pack house." I stared at him, stunned. "Do you hear yourself?" He considered it. "Yes. You can't just, Lenn, that's not normal, that's not how you." I gestured wildly at him, at the bench, at the universe. "Interact with people." His expression softened by half a degree. "I'm trying." It was so honest, so painfully earnest, it short-circuited my brain. "You're terrible at it," I said finally. "Yes. You know that, right?" "Yes." I groaned and dropped onto the bench beside him because standing in front, of him felt too much like confrontation, and I didn't want to fight him. Not really. A beat of silence passed. The river moved slowly in front of us, glittering in the early light. "You keep showing up," I said quietly. "I said we weren't done. You don't know how to ask for anything, do you?" He thought about it, then shook his head. "No." I exhaled. "Most people try words. Conversations. Maybe texting." I thought umbrellas were acceptable. Despite myself, a laugh escaped me. Quiet. Startled. His eyes heated at the sound, and something in my chest went strangely warm. That was the worst part. Not the stalking. Not the record checking. Not the fact that he was a new alpha with too much authority and not enough social sense. The worst part was that I felt calm beside him, like all the noise in the world lowered a few notches when he was near. And that terrified me more than anything he could ever do. The storage room behind the cafe had always been my sanctuary. A cramped, dimly lit sanctuary full of cardboard boxes, and the faint smell of roasted beans, but still, it was the one place guaranteed to be alpha-free. Usually. I was restocking the syrup shelf, half bent over a new delivery box, when footsteps approached. I didn't look up. Sam wandered back here all the time to steal cookies. Or nap. Or both. "I swear to God, Sam," I called, "if you touch the caramel bottles again, I'm filing an employee conduct complaint." "It isn't Sam." The voice hit me like a drop tray, sharp, unexpected, impossible to ignore. My head jerked up. Lenn stood in the doorway. Too broad. Too tall. Too composed for a room that barely fit one normal-sized human. "What are you doing back here?" I demanded, heart leaping into a sprint. "Looking for you," he said simply. My pulse stuttered. "You can't be here. This is employee only." "I'm not in the way." "You exist in the way," I snapped. But before I could retreat, he stepped inside, and instantly the room felt even smaller. Boxes stacked high on the left, a metal rack on the right, barely 3 feet of floor between. No escape route except directly past him. He realized it at the same time I did. His gaze flicked to the tight space, then back to me. He hesitated, which was new, and started to shift aside. Too late. I'd already moved forward with a new box of cups in my hands, tried to squeeze past, misjudged the distance, and we collided. Chest to chest. A soft thud of cardboard. A much louder thud of my heartbeat. His scent hit me a second later. Not a full burst. Nothing intentional. Just a slip of instinct, like his body reacted before his mind did. A subtle surge of warm spice and rain-cooled air. Barely there but unmistakable. Everything inside me jolted. My breath caught. My fingers trembled so hard the cardboard crinkled. My knees didn't go weak exactly, but something in them wanted to. The world narrowed to just him. His breath. His heat. His eyes, dark, sharp, startled, locked on mine. He froze. Completely. As if one wrong move would make the room explode. "Noah," he said quietly. Not a command. Not a claim. More like a question. And that was the problem. I felt it. Not the forced, overwhelming drop I'd been trained to fear. Not the instinctive submission omegas were supposed to spiral into. Something else. Something sharp and unbearably human. My chest tightened as if invisible fingers were closing around it. I swallowed hard, too hard, and forced myself back, palms flat against his shoulders as I shoved. "Don't do that again." My voice cracked like thin ice. My hands were shaking. I hated that he noticed. Lenn stumbled back a half step, shock flickering across his face. Not offended. Not angry. Just shaken. He looked at me the way someone might look at lightning they accidentally caught in their bare hands. "I didn't mean to," he said. His voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. It slipped. "I apologize." He took another step back, giving me space, real space. Enough to breathe. But I couldn't breathe. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the frantic pulse there. "What was that?" "You reacted," he said. "No kidding." "No," he said again. Eyes narrowing slightly as if he were studying a new, confusing phenomenon. "Not like an omega." That stung. "Thanks. Always nice to be reminded I'm defective." His head snapped up at that. "No. That's not what I meant." "Well, that's how it sounded." He closed the remaining distance in 2 steps, then stopped himself. Jaw tightening as if he physically restrained the urge to touch me. "You didn't fall," he said. "You didn't freeze. You didn't go into haze. You didn't do any of the things your old pack claimed you would or wouldn't do. He studied me. Not like a specimen, but like a contradiction. You reacted to me, Noah, he said. And something vibrated under those words. To me. Not to scent. My breath hitched. I hated that he was right. It hadn't been scent. Not really. It had been him. His presence. His closeness. The way he'd said my name like it had weight. Heat crept up my neck. I looked away, grasping the nearest shelf so hard my knuckles went white. This is not happening, I muttered. He exhaled, a slow shift of tension leaving his shoulders. I didn't come here to overwhelm you. You did a great job anyway. No, he said again, firm this time. I came to understand. I laughed shakily. Good luck. I don't understand myself half the time. He moved, slowly, deliberately, to the doorway, creating an exit instead of blocking one. You're not broken, he said. Stop repeating what they taught you. I swallowed hard. He wasn't wrong. That was the worst part. As he stepped out of the room, he paused and glanced back. I'll be careful, he said quietly. Next time. Then he left. I leaned back against the metal rack, heart still in my throat, palms damp, breath shaking. Not scentless, not heartless, just selective. And for the first time in my life, it terrified me. Lenn's office was nothing like I expected. I'd imagined something cold, modern, intimidating. The kind of place designed to remind Omegas where they belonged. Instead, it looked lived in. Warm lighting, deep wood, a plant in the corner that wasn't dead, papers in neat stacks, not perfect ones, a coat draped over the back of a chair instead of hung on a hook, the faint smell of ink and rain. The only thing about the room that felt dangerous was the man standing in it. Lenn turned when I entered, surprise flickering across his expression before it sharpened into something focused. You came? Don't sound so shocked, I said, stepping inside. I'm here to tell you to stop. His brows lifted. Stop? Whatever this crusade is, I said, gesturing vaguely at him, the room, the whole pack building. The records digging, the supervising, the showing up everywhere I breathe. It ends today. He studied me for a moment. Not with the predatory intensity he carried everywhere, but with something almost contemplative. You came all this way just to say that? Yes. Why? Because you won't listen unless I stand in front of you and say it loudly. His lips twitched. You've been saying it loudly. I needed volume plus proximity. That earned a tiny huff of air. Lenn's version of a laugh. Barely there, but real. I hated that I noticed. I folded my arms. So. Consider this an official notification, leave me alone. He didn't sit. Didn't look away. He moved around the desk instead, closing the distance between us until only a few feet remained. No, he said simply. My pulse jumped. No? No. That's not, you can't just. Lenn, this isn't a negotiation. It is, he said. You just didn't realize. I stared at him. Unbelievable. Silence. Dense and waiting. Finally he spoke, voice low but steady. The pack owes you. I blinked. What? You were dismissed incorrectly, labeled incorrectly. The previous alpha ignored protocol, ignored ethics. His jaw tightened. Ignored decency. It was years ago, I said. I got over it. No. You survived it. His eyes met mine, unwavering. There's a difference. I looked away because holding his gaze felt like holding a live wire. And I owe you, he added. I laughed sharply. For what? Existing? For being abandoned by a system I now lead. He said it plainly, without flinching. I inherit the pack's debts. Including you. That's not noble, I snapped. That's paperwork. He stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but enough to feel the heat of him. It's responsibility. This isn't about responsibility, I shot back. You want to fix your reputation using me? That struck home. I saw it. The faint wince, the tightening of his throat. Then something shifted. His control wavered. For the first time since I met him, Lenn's aura surged. Not violently. Not like a threat. But like the edge of a storm slipping its leash for a heartbeat. His voice dropped. Rougher than I'd ever heard it. You think this is about reputation? The air thickened. A subtle wave of scent, restrained but not entirely contained, brushed over my skin. Spice. Rain. Heat. My breath caught. Lenn, I warned. his hands curled at his sides, knuckles whitening. You think I'm doing this for them? Another wave of scent. Stronger this time. Not intentional. Not controlled. Instinct. For a flash the room spun. Not with haze, not with fear, just pressure. Then, he stopped. Just stopped. Like his whole body seized with the effort of pulling the scent back inside. His chest rose sharply. Fell. Rose again. And then, it was gone. The pressure evaporated. The air thinned. The world steadied. He stood absolutely still, jaw clenched, breathing measured with painful precision. He'd pulled himself back from the brink. For me, I'd never seen an alpha do that. He swallowed once before speaking. I apologize. The words weren't casual. They weren't even comfortable. They felt dragged from somewhere deep. I'd never heard an alpha apologize like that either. And for some reason, that rattled me more than the scent had. I took a shaky breath and stepped back. This is why I can't be around you. You're not in danger from me, he said softly. That's the problem, I whispered. His brows furrowed. What does that mean? I shook my head. Nothing. Forget it. He didn't. He watched me like he was memorizing every flicker of my expression. It was unbearable. I'm leaving, I said. Don't. I'm not joining your pack meetings or whatever. I'm not returning. I'm not. I swallowed, trying to push down the tightness in my chest. I'm not yours to fix. His eyes softened, just barely. You're not broken. Stop saying that. I will, he said. When you stop believing it. My vision blurred for a second. I hated it. Hated him for seeing it. So I turned, walked to the door, and opened it. I'll be here, he said behind me. Not a command. Not a threat. A certainty. That's what I'm afraid of, I murmured, and stepped into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind me. I didn't look back. But as I crossed the bridge over the river on my way home, cold air biting my cheeks, city lights scattering across the dark water, I pressed a hand to my chest. My heart was still beating too fast. Not from fear. From something far more dangerous. Something that felt suspiciously like possibility. By the time it happened, I'd already felt the shift. It started in the cafe. In the way some customers lingered too long at the counter, sniffing the air a little too obviously. In the way a beta guy I didn't know watched me with a look that wasn't quite curiosity and wasn't quite fear. Something threaded through with pack scent that didn't belong to him. Packs talk, even when they swear they don't. Is it just me, Sam said one afternoon as we closed up, or have we been getting a suspicious number of very intense dudes lately? I wiped down the counters, forcing my shoulders not to tense. Welcome to downtown. People are weird. Yeah, but these are like organized weird. He mimed the stiff posture of an alpha on alert, shoulders squared. His parody was scarily accurate. They all smell the same too. That, pack thing. Ice slid down my spine. I hadn't noticed, I lied. He squinted at me. Everything okay? Sure, I said too fast. Why wouldn't it be? He watched me for a beat longer than was comfortable, but let it go. Right, don't forget. You promised to help Jules with the delivery tonight. She'll murder you if you bail. Right, Jules. Our overcaffeinated, underslept beta friend who ran a side gig delivering bulk supplies for local businesses and occasionally roped us in. I didn't promise, I muttered. She bribed me with free muffins. Same difference. The sun was already low when I climbed into the back of Jules's beat-up van, wedged between boxes of packaged snacks and plastic-wrapped bulk napkins. Last stop, she called over her shoulder as we pulled away from the curb. Then we're free. You good back there, Noah? Alive and counting boxes, I said. Perfect. Try not to die, I can't afford the paperwork. I checked the delivery slip more out of habit than interest. The address was somewhere on the edge of the city, where brick gave way to trees and old structures. A name I didn't recognize. A company that sounded generic. Nothing in me screamed danger. Maybe it should have. The further we drove, the more the city thinned. Streetlights grew sparse. The air changed, picking up the rich green undertone of pine and damp earth. I felt my shoulders slowly draw upward, muscles bracing without my permission. We turned down a narrow road lined with tall trees. Ahead, through a break in the branches, I saw it, an old clearing, ringed by pine and half-faded wooden posts. Gravel crunched under the tires as we pulled in. My lungs stopped. I knew this layout. Not this exact place, but the bones of it. The open space in the center, the worn track in the dirt, the shadow of a long-abandoned training ground. Pack territory. Hey, I said slowly, leaning forward. Jules. Where exactly is this? She parked near a low storage building and hopped out. Some Pack-owned facility. They're refurbing it, I think. Relax, it's a legit drop. Look, I've been here twice this week already. No one bit me. She swung open the back doors. Come on, help me get these off. I want to sleep at some point before dawn. Every instinct I had screamed at me to say no. I got out anyway. Because I was an idiot. Because I'd gotten good at ignoring my instincts. Because part of me still believed I could pass as beta if I just kept my head down. We unloaded the first stack of boxes in silence. The clearing was quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't empty, just listening. The scent in the air was faint but unmistakable. Pine sap, earth, and a low hum of pack. Old habits flared. The urge to shrink, to move softer, to leave. I powered through it, shoulders tight. Just leave them by the door, Jules called, balancing a box on her hip as she fumbled for her phone. I set the last box down and straightened, flexing my fingers. That was it. In, out, done. Then someone spoke behind me. You're not supposed to be here. The voice wasn't Lenn's. It was rougher, younger, edged with something ugly. I turned slowly. 2 alphas stood between me and the open clearing, blocking the path back to the van. Both broad, both wearing the same kind of fitted jacket that screamed training. Neither of them familiar. But their sense hit like a memory. Dominance with no attempt at gentleness, layered over the stale echo of older traditions. Jules wasn't there. At some point she'd moved around the corner of the building to scan a receipt. It was just me and them. Delivery, I said, keeping my tone flat. We're leaving. One of them stepped closer, nostrils flaring. His gaze narrowed on my throat, then swept down, cataloging everything with dissection-level focus. Unmarked, he said to his friend. That's him. My blood went cold. The second alpha's lips curled. The stray, not Omega, not Noah, just property that had wandered off. Pack business, I said, forcing my voice not to shake. You should talk to your alpha. We are, the first one said. He wants you back. Funny. I distinctly remembered Lenn saying nothing of the sort. The second alpha took another step toward me, closing the distance until the edge of his scent brushed me. It was strong, aggressive, pushing. The kind designed to force heads down and knees weak. Old training grounds. Old games. He was trying to make me drop. The urge to flinch clawed at my nerves. My muscles tensed. Instinct and memory tangled, screaming at me to fold, to appease, to make it stop. I didn't move. The scent washed over me like heat through glass. Felt, but not penetrating. My heart pounded, but my spine stayed straight. The first alpha frowned. Why isn't he? I said, I cut in, the words ripping out before I could stop them. You should talk to your alpha. Their gazes snapped back to me, eyes narrowing. The second alpha advanced another pace, turning up the pressure. His scent flared sharp and heavy, the air thickening. I remembered being younger, smaller, drowning in that kind of smell, chest squeezed, vision blurring. I remembered kneeling before I even realized I'd dropped. Not this time. My fingers curled into fists at my sides. I kept my chin lifted, not defiantly, just level. Drop, he said, voice roughening with the command. No, I replied. His nostrils flared. Frustration rippled through his scent. The first alpha stepped in too, doubling the pressure, dominance pounding against me like a physical force. My knees trembled for a second. Then held. They stared at me. Genuine confusion overtaking their faces. What is wrong with you? The first one muttered. Everything, I said. Ask your files. They didn't like that. The second alpha's hand twitched like he wanted to grab me. We can do this the easy way, or you can move. The voice that cut through the clearing was colder than the air. Every hair on my body stood up. Lenn stepped out from the tree line like he'd grown there, all dark coat and controlled rage. His gaze locked onto the 2 alphas, and the temperature of the world seemed to plummet. I'd seen him serious before. Focused. Even irritated. I'd never seen this. This was alpha. The real thing. Both younger alphas straightened instinctively, their sense faltering. Dominance, crumpling in the presence of something much larger. Alpha. The first one started. We were just... What? Lenn said, and the word carried more threat than a shouted order. Do you think you're doing? The second alpha swallowed. You said we had an unclaimed Omega. I said we had a member the pack failed, Lenn cut in. Not prey, not property, and not yours to corner. His scent rolled out then, not by accident, not entirely controlled. It surged over the clearing, thick and powerful. A storm breaking open. I felt it like a punch to the chest. My breath caught. My skin tingled. My heart stuttered, and then slammed into a new rhythm. This wasn't the forced dominance I'd grown up choking on. It was heavier, yes, but cleaner, clearer, like standing on the edge of a cliff and feeling the absolute certainty of the drop. The younger alphas dropped their eyes first. We thought, one of them tried. That was your first mistake, Lenn said. Assuming I share your habits. For a second, all I could do was stare at him. He was terrifying. And he was between me and them. The second alpha tried to recover, turning his frustration on me. He should be in the pack, on our land, under... Finish that sentence, Lenn said softly. I dare you. Silence fell so fast it rang. The younger alphas wilted under his gaze. Finally, reluctantly, they stepped back. Lenn didn't look away from them as he spoke. You will not approach him again without my explicit permission. You will not use scent as a weapon on pack property unless there is a physical threat. And you will not lay a hand on him. Ever. You can't change tradition overnight, the first alpha muttered. Too low but not low enough. Lenn's eyes cut to him like a blade. Watch me. They flinched. Then, like someone had snapped invisible leashes, they turned and backed away. Melting. Toward the tree line until their presence faded into the general hum of pack territory. The wind rustled through the pines. A bird cried somewhere overhead. My heartbeat roared in my ears. Slowly Lenn turned to me. The storm didn't leave his eyes. It just softened at the edges. Are you hurt? He asked. It took me a second to find my voice. No. Did they touch you? No. His chest rose and fell, a little too sharply. His scent was still thick in the air, pressure buzzing against my skin like static. You shouldn't be here, he said. I didn't know this was pack land, I snapped back, some of my numbness cracking into anger. I was helping a friend with a delivery. I'm not exactly joyriding around your precious territory. His jaw flexed, like he wanted to argue but couldn't. You need to be more careful. Funny, I said. That's exactly what I was thinking about you. We stared at each other, charged silence stretching between us. His scent swelled again, involuntary this time. Not anger, something hotter, more tangled. It crashed over me, powerful and raw. I didn't drop, but the world narrowed. My fingers tingled. My pulse pounded in my throat. Something in my chest turned toward him, like metal to a magnet. I took a step forward before I realized I was moving. Not because he commanded it. Not because instinct shoved me. Because I wanted to. His eyes widened just a fraction. Noah, he said, my name rough on his tongue. We were too close now. The old training ground wrapped around us in a ring of pine and memory, but all I could focus on was the heat radiating off of him, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the way his gaze dropped, just once, to my throat. My breath stuttered. He lifted a hand. Slowly, carefully, like every inch of movement cost him. His fingers brushed the side of my neck, the bare skin where a mark could go. Not pressing, not claiming, just touching. A shiver tore through me. Not fear, not submission, recognition. Every cell in my body seemed to lean into that point of contact. My eyes fluttered shut for half a heartbeat. When I opened them again, he was looking at me like I was the cliff, and he was one step from falling. His thumb twitched. One more second. One more inch. That was all it would take to change everything. He didn't move. His hand trembled against my skin, and then he pulled it away. Just like that. The absence of his touch was almost physically painful. I exhaled shakily. Why did you stop? His expression was tight, controlled, eyes still storm dark. Because if I mark you, it will be your choice, he said. Not fear, not pressure, not tradition, yours. Something cracked open in my chest. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't neat. It was messy and painful and years too late. Nobody had ever put me in that sentence before. Choice. Mine. I swallowed hard, words refusing to cooperate. I broke off because my voice betrayed me, going thin. He held my gaze, his own steady despite the tension in his shoulders. You are not a debt to be collected, Noah. You're not a symbol. You're not a mistake to fix. I should have argued. Told him he was wrong. That he was projecting. That this was still about his conscience, his pack, his record. But all I could think was, he could have. He didn't. He chose control over instinct. Respect over tradition. Me over his own power. And that terrified me more than anything the old pack had ever done. Because for the first time the idea of being marked didn't feel like a cage. It felt like something dangerously close to hope. I didn't remember leaving the pack grounds. 1 second, Lenn's hand was falling away from my neck, leaving a ghost of heat behind. The next, I was running. Not because of him. Because of me. Because something inside me had cracked open, and it wasn't fear. It was far more dangerous. It was want. It was recognition. It was possibility. I ran from that. The sky broke open on my way back toward the city. A thin drizzle at first, then steady sheets of cold rain that blurred the streetlights into trembling halos. I didn't slow down. The water plastered my clothes to my skin, soaked my hair, numbed my fingers. Good. Maybe if I got cold enough, everything inside me would freeze too. I cut across side streets, down an alley, over a low fence, until I reached the riverfront. The city always looked softer at night. Like someone had lowered the brightness on reality. Boats bobbed in the dark water, their lights glimmering like tiny fragile planets. I stumbled onto the pedestrian bridge and leaned over the railing, breathing hard. My heart wouldn't settle. My thoughts wouldn't either. He had touched me. I had leaned toward him. I had moved first. My stomach twisted. I wasn't scared of him. I was scared of the part of me that reached for him without asking permission. I'd spent years building walls to protect myself from pack instinct. From dominance. From being claimed or used or labeled defective. Now one man, one alpha with 2 soft eyes and 2 strong restraint, was tearing holes straight through them. I pressed my forehead to my forearm, letting the rain wash over my face. "What is wrong with me?" I whispered. "You ran." I jerked upright. Lenn stood at the far end of the bridge, coat clinging to him, dark hair dripping, breath visible in the cold. He looked wrecked. Not physically, he was too strong for that, but exhausted, angry, and worried in ways that didn't make sense for someone who barely knew me. He walked toward me, steps slow, controlled, like he was afraid I might bolt again if he moved too fast. "I told you not to run," he said, voice low. "I wasn't running from you," I shot back, though my voice shook. "I was running from—" I gestured helplessly at myself. "This—" He stopped a few feet away, rain sliding down his cheekbones. He didn't have the alpha mask on. No dominance. No posture. Just Lenn. Tall, quiet, human in a way I wasn't used to seeing him. "What are you afraid of?" he asked. "You," I said automatically. His face tightened. "Not like that," I added quickly. "Not of you hurting me. Not of you marking me or forcing me. I'm afraid of—" I swallowed. "Of wanting things I'm not supposed to want." He breathed in once, shallow and sharp. "What things?" "You know what things." My voice cracked, humiliation burning my throat. "You offered me a choice, Lenn. No one's ever done that. And I didn't know what to do with it." He took one more step. Slow enough that I could see every shift of muscle, every hesitation. "I didn't come here to drag you back," he said. "I came because you were trembling, and you walked away like the ground was falling under you. I'm fine." "You're shaking." "That's the rain." His gaze flicked to my hands. They were trembling violently around the railing. He lifted his own hand. Not touching me, just offering, palm up, rain collecting in his lines. "Then talk to me," he said. "Don't run. Talk." My throat tightened. The rain felt too cold suddenly, like it had seeped under my ribs. "You want me," I said, voice barely audible, "because I'm missing pieces." His expression didn't change immediately. Then something softened, a tiny shift, like a storm leveling into a steady wind. "No," he said. "I want you because you kept walking without them." The words hit me like a physical blow. Because no one had ever said something like that to me. Because no one had ever framed my survival as something worth wanting. Because he wasn't talking about instinct or scent or roles. He was talking about me. "I'm not strong," I whispered. "You are," he said simply. "I'm not normal." "Good." I broke. "You bent," he corrected. "And then you kept going." "Stop." My voice cracked again. Stop making it sound like a good thing. It is. His voice roughened. You think I want someone who just falls because I tell them to? Someone who obeys out of instinct or fear? No, I'm not them. I don't want a cage either. Something inside me splintered. I wasn't crying, not exactly, but the rain blurred everything, until I couldn't tell what was water and what wasn't. My breath stumbled. My chest felt too tight. Lenn moved closer, slowly, until he stood right in front of me. He didn't touch. He didn't reach. He didn't lean in. He simply existed, warm, steady, unthreatening, a presence instead of a force. Noah, he said quietly, you ran from me because you didn't think you deserved the choice I gave you. I closed my eyes. But you do, he continued. You deserved it the moment your old pack threw you away. I wasn't worth keeping. You were worth saving. My breath hitched. Hard. That was it. That was the moment something in me finally gave way. Not collapsed, not submitted, just opened. Because for the first time someone wasn't trying to contain me or fix me. They were seeing me. Me. No instinct. No role. No defect. Just Noah. A choked sound left my throat. Not quite a sob, but dangerously close. I pressed my fist against my mouth, trying to hold myself together. Lenn didn't move. He just stood with me in the rain, as if holding space was the only thing he needed to do. I'm not a cage, he said softly. And I don't want to build one around you. My voice was barely a breath. Then what do you want? His eyes, storm dark, earnest, painfully gentle, met mine. I want you to choose me, he said. Not because you're afraid. Not because you're alone. Not because you think you owe me something. I want you to choose me because you want to. A warmth spread through my chest, fragile and terrifying. And if I don't? I whispered. He exhaled, rain dripping from his jaw. Then I'll still make sure you're safe. And I'll still want good things for you. And I'll still walk away if that's what you need. My knees wavered. Because that was the first time an alpha had ever said those words. He wasn't claiming me. He was freeing me. And somehow, that made me feel more seen, more wanted, than any mark ever could. Lenn's house wasn't what I expected from a pack alpha. No stone walls or trophies. No heavy scents marking territory. No cold masculinity designed to intimidate. Just warmth. Soft light from lamps instead of harsh overhead bulbs. A couch that looked actually comfortable. Shelves of books. A blanket draped over the backrest like someone used it often. And the faintest scent of cedar and rain, Lenn's scent, but muted, softened, controlled. I stood awkwardly near the entryway, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floor. You should change, Lenn said gently, hanging his soaked coat on a hook. You're freezing? I'm fine, I muttered, crossing my arms. He glanced at my trembling hands. You're not. Before I could snap back, he added, there are dry clothes in the bathroom cabinet. Take what you need. There was no pressure behind the words. No dominance humming beneath them. Just a simple offer. I hesitated, then nodded once. The bathroom was small, clean, and smelled faintly of eucalyptus. The clothes he'd left were soft sweats and a plain t-shirt that looked like it would swallow me whole. I changed quickly, folding my wet ones over the edge of the tub. When I stepped back into the living room, Lenn was in the kitchen, 2 mugs in hand. Tea? He asked. Sure, I said, voice quieter than I meant it to be. He handed me a mug and nodded toward the couch. I sat, instinctively curling against the armrest, the blanket within reach but untouched. Lenn took the far end of the couch, leaving enough space between us to breathe. No pressure. No tension. Just quiet. For a while, we sipped tea in silence, the warmth bleeding slowly into my fingers. Then Lenn set his mug down. You asked why I want you, he said. Why I keep showing up. Why I don't let it go. I stared into my cup. I remember. It isn't obligation, he said. And it isn't tradition. The truth is, I became alpha too early. That made me glance up. He wasn't looking at me. He was watching the steam rise from his tea, expression softened by memory and something darker. The old alpha died suddenly, Lenn continued. The pack split. Half the elders fought for control. A few families tried to leave. I was barely 27. They pushed me into the role because I was the only one neutral enough not to start a war. I blinked. You never wanted it. Wanting didn't matter, he said simply. Someone had to hold things together. And I wasn't ready. I made mistakes, hurt people unintentionally, got used to giving orders because I didn't know how else to keep the peace. His voice quieted. And then I found your name in the files. I swallowed. And you decided to, what, fix me? No. He finally looked at me, eyes steady, open in a way I hadn't seen before. I wanted to fix the pack. You just happened to be the piece they'd broken most clearly. My throat tightened. I don't want to be a symbol. You aren't, he said. You're the reminder I needed. That people aren't roles. They're people. Something warm tugged painfully behind my ribs. I looked down again, fingers tightening around the mug. I'm not easy to deal with. Good. You keep saying that. I mean it every time. A breathy, startled laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Lenn's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Then his expression changed. Softer, more careful. You can stay here tonight, he said quietly. You're safe, I promise. My chest tightened. And if I say no? I'll drive you home, he said. And won't step inside unless you ask. I stared at him. He was big, strong, dominant. The kind of alpha my old pack had trained me to fear. But he looked at me like I was something delicate he didn't want to break. Then he said the words that hit me harder than any scent ever had. Stay. Only if you want to. Only if you want to. Like choice wasn't a threat, or a trick, or a currency. Like it was simply mine. My voice came out small. I don't know how to go back. You don't have to, he said. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until you choose it. I set the mug down because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'm tired, I whispered. I'm tired of being scared of my own instincts. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being a defect. You're not. Stop saying that. He shook his head once. I won't. I breathed out shakily, then lifted my chin. If I return, it's on my terms. No pressure, no orders, no being paraded around like a rescued relic. Agreed, he said immediately. No demands. None. No Mark, I added quickly, heart pounding. Not until, not unless, I choose it. He didn't flinch. Didn't hesitate. Of course, he said softly. The room felt too small suddenly. Too warm. Too full of possibilities I wasn't ready for. And yet, okay, I whispered. I'll come back. His breath caught, just barely, as if he hadn't expected a real answer tonight. Then his shoulders loosened, a quiet relief smoothing the lines in his face. Thank you, he said, and there was no dominance in it. No ownership. Just sincerity. He reached for the blanket and gently draped it over my legs, not touching me more than he had to. A small, almost invisible smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You can sleep here, he murmured, rising. I'll take the chair. And for the first time in years, I believed someone when they said I was safe. The pack territory looked different when I returned. It wasn't the buildings. Those were the same, cabins and communal halls tucked between tall pines. Training grounds half claimed by grass, the river cutting a soft silver line through it all. What had changed was the atmosphere. Less tension. Fewer harsh glances. More watching. Carefully. Curiously. Hesitantly. Not all acceptance, but not hostility either. Lenn walked beside me, hands tucked into his pockets, posture relaxed but alert. A silent signal to anyone who dared question why I was here. The weight of him was a shield I hadn't asked for, but didn't reject. We passed a pair of alphas, stacking lumber. They paused, scent flickering with surprise, then dipped their heads politely to Lenn. And after a moment to me. I kept my own head level, not lowered, not raised. Just level. They're trying, Lenn murmured. So am I murmured back. He glanced at me, something warm tugging at the corners of his expression. Settling back into pack life wasn't immediate. I didn't move into the Omega housing. I didn't join group dinners. I didn't attend training or council meetings. Instead, I spent time in Lenn's home, or on the edge of the territory, or in the small park near the riverbank where the scent of pine mixed with city air. And slowly, very slowly, things shifted. Jules and Sam came to visit one weekend, armed with muffins and terrible jokes. Jules marched around Lenn's living room like she owned it. Sam accidentally knocked over one of Lenn's meticulously arranged books, and nearly died of panic. Lenn took it all in stride. They weren't pack, but they were mine. And the pack learned to respect that. A few braver betas from the territory approached me with tentative greetings. An omega named Risa brought me tea one afternoon without explanation, then scurried away before I could thank her. 2 young alphas helped me carry supplies without offering unsolicited dominance. Small things. Human things. I could live with small things. I set boundaries. They learned them. Lenn backed them. Every time. Days melted into weeks. I found a rhythm. One that felt nothing like the rigid roles I'd been raised with. Lenn and I fell into a pattern that wasn't quite domestic but wasn't distant either. Soft mornings with shared tea. Evenings spent walking the paths through the woods. Quiet conversations on the couch, punctuated by awkward jokes from me and nearly smiles from him. He didn't hover. He didn't push. He didn't scent mark anything near me. But he was there. A steady, solid presence. Not a cage, not a shadow, just someone who stayed. Once, during a walk in the park, he nudged my shoulder with his own because I'd teased him about his terrible handwriting. I pretended it didn't make my stomach flutter. He pretended he hadn't done it. We were both liars in small, harmless ways. One evening, we stood outside his home, twilight dripping through the branches in soft violet streaks. Crickets hummed, the air smelled like warm pine and faint river mist. I leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed loosely. Lenn stood a step away, hands in his pockets, watching the sky. It felt like the world had exhaled. "You're quiet," he said. "That's allowed now," I replied. He huffed a soft laugh. "I didn't say it wasn't." "No, but you implied it once. With your eyebrows." "My eyebrows do not imply." "They absolutely do." He shook his head, amused in a very Lenn way, which meant the corners of his mouth tilted up almost invisibly. A comfortable silence settled again. I turned toward him and said, "Just don't try to fix me." He looked at me fully then, eyes steady, expression open in a way that wasn't common for him. "I won't," he said simply, "but I might learn how to listen to you." My chest tightened, not painfully, just with something warm and unfamiliar. Hope, maybe. Safety. Choice. I didn't move when he stepped closer, closing the small gap between us until the heat of him brushed my space but didn't crowd it. His hand lifted, slow, unmistakable, and came to rest on my shoulder. Just a touch. Just his palm, warm through the fabric of my shirt. But he didn't pull away. And I didn't step back. His thumb brushed once, unconscious and gentle, a question without words. I answered it by staying still. His breath hitched, soft but audible. Then the faintest trace of his scent curled around us. Not dominance, not command, just emotion. Recognition. Affection. Promise. Not a mark. Not yet. But maybe someday. When I chose it. The sun dipped below the trees, casting gold along the edge of the clearing, and I let myself lean, barely, into his touch. Held, but not owned. And for the first time in years, my heart didn't feel like something I needed to run from. The world narrowed to warmth, pine, and the steady, unhurried presence of the alpha I had chosen, finally, to stay with.